Hello, it is Rebekah R. Jones, and I am so pleased to have you with me today. We're going to do some really fun stuff in this Bible art journaling challenge. I am in Genesis chapter 18, verses 1 through 8, and we're talking about Abraham and Sarah. This is such a wildly popular section of scripture in the Bible, but it is actually something that really is quite meaningful to me, and I imagine to you as well. So I'm just showing you through a few things that I'm going to be using today, and I just used a Inktense pencil, which is just ink in the form of a dried up pencil, so you can draw with it, and then when you get it wet it activates. And I'm just using this little thin light box to trace an image which I got from a website called Paint My Photo that you can use as well. It's a free little system that they've got going for people to use reference photos, and I've got the links over on my blog for that. So this is just super easy. I'm just taking a brush that has water already in the little handle there, and then I am getting it wet on the tip of my little pencil, and it's activating the color. But I'm just going to switch to my Inktense blocks here just because it's easy, but I want you to know that you can use either one, and either one will work for you. So you can use a brush, or you can just draw on like you see I've done with the tree, and it's just so easy to use them. The nice thing about Inktense as opposed to watercolor is that Inktense is ink, which means it's permanent. And that may sound scary, but actually it's really good because it means that when you activate it and then it dries, it actually stays permanently where you put it, instead of actually reactivating with water like watercolor can do. So if you apply too much pressure with watercolor over the top and you're putting another layer on, you can actually wipe away the color that you've put there. Whereas once Inktense has dried, as long as you activated it, it's not going anywhere. And that can be really handy when you're a bit newer to using water media like this. So it just stays where you put it, and then you can actually go on top of it and add more color, and it's not going to wipe away your efforts below it, which is kind of neat. So you can use pencils or blocks. It's the exact same product, and I really like to do Bible journaling with this brush because it just has the water right inside, and you squeeze it to let it out. So what are we doing in this section of scripture, and why am I drawing a tree? As you can see in Genesis chapter 18, I really encourage you to read this section in the Bible. Try chapter 17 through 19. You'll get a nice little understanding of what's happening in that portion of scripture. And I really love this. So the Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre, and Abraham was sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, "O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet. Rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves. After that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. Now there's a lot of places that we could look at in this scripture that are really incredible. And I'm not even getting into the section where there's a story that goes on even further in chapter 18, where Sarah is declared that she will carry a child, and doesn't really necessarily believe the story. It's an incredible one, so please do read it if you haven't before, but I'm guessing if you've been a Christian for very long, you've heard this story or read it for yourself. And it is really amazing. Now, you can see I'm just using more Inktense, and I'm avoiding where I've already been, and I have all of those yellow limbs underneath there. Now, I wouldn't reckon that it's a good idea to go over the top of them because those branches are yellow, and I'm going over them with blue and yellow, when you mix it together, makes green. So I don't really want a green tree, but I can go back over them and it's just yellow. I'm cheating a little bit, so I'm going to do that. And then what I'm going to end up with is a really good little system there where I can see where the branches are that I want, but that isn't moving anywhere because it's not being reactivated like watercolor would. So it gives me something to look at and know where I want my branches to be, but then I can build a sky over the top of it, avoiding the biggest branches, which I don't really necessarily want to have be blue. All right, so Abraham and Sarah. Incredible story to me about them becoming, Abraham became the father of nations. It was an incredible thing, but I love that he stood under the tree while they ate. He hung out with God. I love that. Now, I think that using supplies to express what God's doing can be a little complicated. I try really hard to link, and here's my blog. You can see I've got all these linked with all of the shops that you can click on, and I've added coupons as well because I think that some of you really want to know how to find the best deals. So I've linked to the best deals that you can get at the time of publishing it, and then that will help you get good deals with the supplies that I've actually linked. So hopefully between the coupons and the supplies being linked over there, it will make it really easy for you. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then just go into the description box below and you'll see a link to the blog post. I always do that in all of my YouTube videos, and then you'll be able to see lots more. As you can see a picture of the exact supply and then a link to all the different shops so you can pick your favorite one and go and do that. And that actually is how I offer these challenges for free. I spent 5 hours editing this video today before I'm even recording right now. It is a lot of work. I average about 16 hours per lesson, and then I support it afterwards. And I do that because I can afford to do that because people actually click on the links that I use, which I get a small commission for, and it helps support this ministry. And you certainly don't have to do that. You can just use whatever you have. But for those who find it helpful, then that is how this ministry is supported in order for me to keep doing challenges, and I appreciate it. I actually added Michael's because everybody asked me to do that, and I'm just going to see whether or not you guys are interested. If you click on Michael's and use the coupons that I've got on there for online, then that will help me know that you want me to keep using Michael's. But I just stick with the partners that I know are going to benefit you guys the most, so you can basically vote by clicking on those things that you believe that certain shops are meaningful to you to have there, and I'll just go with what makes sense to you and support you in your journey, because this is what I do this for, is I want you to encounter God through creativity. And if you need supplies for that, great. If you don't need any supplies, great. Hang out and enjoy it because it is free, and I want it to keep staying that way, and it will. And so you can see I've just put down color, and I think that a lot of people would stop right here. Now just look at that. Can you see the water filling up in that little well there? Because I pushed on the handle, and then it starts to bring out the water. And the harder you push, the more liquid you get. So that is how that water brush works, and people ask me about it a lot, so I thought I'd let you know. So you can see I could have just put that light color down, but this is where I start to add value. Now, if you were to pause this and take a picture, do what you're doing with your artwork, and then pause with your phone, take a picture of your page, and just back up from it and take a picture of it, and then go into your little video editor that you've got, or your photo editor, and you'll see a little way to edit the color and turn it into grayscale. Now that might have different wording, but just look for something that's gonna let you see it in grayscale, not necessarily black and white, but grayscale. What you're gonna see is the value of your painting. This is just a little artsy tip. What ends up happening is you can see where it's really, really light, and you can see where it's really, really dark. And you want to go for at least 3 different values. Kind of have a real dark, have a real kind of medium, and a real light. Something in those 3 ranges. But the better you get at what you're doing, you can have even 5 or even 7 values. So you would have an extreme dark and an extreme light. And what I find often helps people to end up with something that feels more realistic is to get more values into their painting. So don't be scared of getting a little bit darker in certain areas with your shadows, and then in those highlights. And right here, as I'm building this tree, the way I'm making it look more realistic is I've decided where the light has come from. And I think the light is coming from one side, so all of the bottom and the left side of my tree have more shadows, and all of the top and the right side have the highlights where the sun is coming onto it. And that helps me decide how I'm going to lay it out. It's that simple, really. And it takes a little practice, but it is very fun. And really, at the end of the day, I always say this, it doesn't matter how it looks. What matters is that you're spending time in the Word being transformed by it. So have some fun, learn creativity in a little bit more, challenge yourself to do things that you haven't tried before, and enjoy the process. But please don't let this be about perfection. What this is about is you finding a depth of relationship with God that you can't find elsewhere. And, I can still read my Bible and I can still enjoy it, but this is a working Bible, I like to call it. This Bible works for me because it does a job. It helps me to encounter Jesus in a way that I can't encounter him when I'm just reading. When I read and I study, I encounter God in one way. When I get to the creativity part, I put an expression to something that I'm creating, and it just brings a further depth to it. Now, when I was using this whole process, I thought initially that I was going to use some pens, and I was going to do that, and you can kind of see it peeled up my Inktense, and I didn't really like how that was looking. Now, sometimes a little bit of scruffy distress look is kind of neat, but I didn't like it, so I just went back over it with Inktense, and I just wanted to show that to you. I have always made a commitment to show you mistakes and how I fix them, and really you can just go over about anything that you want to. And now just get in there, use little pressure so you get the very tip of your brush instead of the wider part by pushing harder, and then you'll end up with little tiny branches. And then we'll go in and slap on some nice little fluffy leaves that don't take any skill at all, and what we'll be left with is the ability to add the shimmer to this, the Pearlescent Watercolor. And there is just something about it that's been really speaking to me recently, because I really want to capture that moment that Abraham and Sarah had when Abraham was under the tree. It goes on in Genesis chapter 18, and it's talking right in verse 9. It says, "They said to him, 'Where is Sarah your wife?' And he said, 'She's in the tent.' The Lord said, 'I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son.' And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him, and now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah." Now, this is an interesting thing here, that literally at that moment, at that point where Abraham said, "Let me give you rest. Let me bring some water to wash your feet. Let me give you some food. Let me host you and give you a place to rest and be comfortable in my land, in my home. Just come and be with me, hang out as a friend. I want to give you a place of honor and bestow on you the things that would honor you by giving you a place to wash your feet, do these things." He did that, and there was a shift that happened in that moment where he extended friendship to the Lord, not just on what can you do for me, but what can I do for you. That that shift, that brings a depth. You know, this whole series, Deeper Still, is all about that adventure into the depths of God. And you know, this is a depth of God that I think so many long for but don't know how to access. And really, if we can look at how God has helped us to fashion friendship with other people, and to look at where we've done that in a healthy way that is not selfish, but is thinking respectfully and lovingly about the people around us, those kinds of friendships are actually where we find a really good model for how to be friends with God. He wants to bestow love on us, and He wants us to bestow love on Him. It's a friendship where we look at each other's dreams and we look at how we can make those possible, how we can help make dreams come alive. Now, look at what I'm doing here. I am not interested in spending hours doing details when I can actually use the tip of my brush to just push it. You can see how my hand is kind of going at different angles. I'm putting some little leaves on those tiny mini trees in the background. And I am going around with my brush, just kind of pushing it onto the paper and going in circles so that I'm leaving little puddles. And sometimes I'm going in front of a branch and sometimes I'm going behind a branch. And I'm doing that so that I can prove that the shadows that I created for the different branches really are showing which ones are behind and which ones are in front. So I've sped this up a little bit, and you can just give yourself a little bit of time to think about how you're actually putting them on there, and leave some space for the sky so that it can be beautiful and showing through. And just enjoy the process. Just really enjoy the process of what it must be like to entertain God under your tree, and how that would look to befriend Him and to give Him some food. What would you cook for Him? How would you look after Him? What kind of water would you bring? What kind of container would you put that water in to help Him wash His feet? Would you wash His feet for Him? Would you give Him your very best? How would you help make His desires come true? And what would He do for you? I love how we can look at Scripture to teach us something about ourselves. Now you can see all of this stuff. I'm making sure that my page is really, really dry. And then I'm getting in there and I am giving every single one of these pearlescent colors that I plan to use a really nice mopping of water so that they get soft and are pliable like a loose watercolor should be. We don't get enough activation from our watercolor when it's dry, and so we need to reactivate our watercolor when it's dry like this by putting some really good sloppy amounts of water in there, letting it soak in for a couple of minutes, maybe even 20 minutes if you want to get a lot of color. And then you'll find that your watercolors are actually more vibrant than they have been in the past. It just does something to them and allows more of the pigment to come onto your brush. So I'm putting a measured and small amount of gold all across the tree. Now the tree is not magical, of course, but as you can see, there's just a tiny bit of shimmer. I just want to give a suggestive look to this spot that reminds us of the lingering presence of God in our lives and in our space, in our home, under our tree, when we give space to the Lord. I'm putting more shimmer on my leaves as well. And this part may be slightly not transparent if you put too thick of a layer on, so try and limit how much you're doing if you're trying to do something similar than this. I actually did not show you on camera because it's currently on its way to me tonight, but it's actually possible for you to get from Gonzai Tombi, just like that little rectangle of different shimmery golds. You can get some pearl colors, just like that little tiny square thing I was just showing you. There is actually some colors and I've linked to them. So there's 4 different ways that you can get some shimmery colors. There's like a whole bunch of pearl colors like green and pink and red and things like that. And I used them while I was at the CHA this spring, and they are amazing. And I've finally gotten them here in England, so they're coming to me tonight, so I couldn't show them to you. But I've used that small box, which is fantastic too. I've linked to all of them. And I decided that, you know, God's not one-dimensional. So I decided to use a variety of different shimmery colors to try and show off a little bit of the multidimensionalness of God's presence and how beautiful it is. There's something shimmery that just says that God's presence lingered there. And that's what I want to be reminded of here. How beautiful He is, how wonderful He is, and what it looks like when He encounters our lives and we make space for Him at the foot of our tree. Now, I am drying very carefully in between every single one of these layers so that they don't get muddled with each other and they just flick on top, and you can see how much fun that is and how beautiful it is, and what a good reminder. Will you come and join me? I am looking forward to seeing you over on my blog, and I'll see you soon. Love you guys.